Good morning and welcome to Fox 29's News Now on this dreary Wednesday morning. We're going to get started out of Washington, where a State Department Foreign Service officer will tell House impeachment investigators Wednesday that former National Security Advisor John Bolton cautioned him that Rudy Giuliani was a key voice with the president on Ukraine, which could complicate U.S. goals in the Eastern European country. Fox's Doug Luzader has the story this morning from Washington.
Interesting. All right, 7:10. Two State Department officials are scheduled to testify today as Democrats continue to make their case for impeachment.
And this follows some tense exchanges yesterday with another witness and a day before the U.S. House conducts its first full impeachment-related vote.
So who did they talk to yesterday? A man that was listening to the infamous call in July?
Right. So this was a first-hand witness, and this is also the first current White House official to testify as part of this deal. Now, Capitol Hill almost this week has a revolving door of impeachment witnesses.
Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman departed Capitol Hill last night after 10 hours of questioning behind closed doors, getting into a waiting cab. He may be a star witness for Democrats, describing his concerns as he had listened in on that phone call between President Trump and the president of Ukraine, and the pressure he heard for Ukraine to investigate former Vice President Joe Biden and his son Hunter's business dealings. Vindman's appearance is significant because he is the first current White House official to testify.
We hope that his example of patriotism will be emulated by others.
There was a kangaroo court. I was there.
This morning, one Republican congressman who was in the hearing yesterday said Democrats blocked questions from GOP members, specifically about who else Vindman spoke with.
I wish the public could watch what took place yesterday, but it's just more of the same. And the resolution, that the fake resolution they're proposing is just going to be more of the same.
Now, that resolution to approve the impeachment inquiry process is slated for a full vote in the House tomorrow, for the first time getting each member on the record. Now, President Trump has long insisted that the inquiry has been rigged, and this from the White House yesterday. The resolution put forward by Speaker Pelosi confirms that House Democrats' impeachment has been an illegitimate sham from the start, as it lacked any proper authorization by a House vote.
Now, Democrats are very, very likely to get the 216 votes they would need to get this resolution passed tomorrow. And that even assumes that every Republican, as expected, votes against it. Mike and Alex.
All right, Doug, we'll see you again tomorrow.
Thank you.
And in consumer news this morning, iPhone users are waking up today to nearly 400 new emojis. Many of them are part of Apple's push to be more inclusive. Fox Business Network's Tracy Carrasco has more.
Oh, when I got up this morning, I looked at my phone and there were 400 new emojis that I can use today.
How did I miss this memo?
Tracy, how exciting.
Yes, this is all part of Apple's latest update, the iOS 13.2 update that is now available. As you said, with that comes 400
Woo!
new emojis. And really, we're seeing a lot of them promoting Apple's message of inclusiveness.
Oh.
Apple really started making the change back in 2015 with the different skin tone emojis. That was really the first big step towards inclusiveness. So now they've added gender-neutral emojis, also emojis with prosthetic limbs, other disability-related emojis like service dogs, wheelchairs, hearing aids, these types of things.
Yeah.
In addition, of course, to the other ones like food items and animals like a flamingo and a skunk. But really, Apple trying to include everyone, make sure everyone has an emoji that they can relate to.
Well, do they have TV people?
I don't know. They do have some new some professions, a painter, a welder, and a scientist. Those already were there, but I think there are some other ones that they're adding to the list.
Do they have a...
I haven't updated my phone, so I don't know all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't either.
Do they have a
I
polygamist?
delay the updates.
I don't think they have that.
No?
I
did
don't
you
know
show
about
that?
that one.
Like a lot of people.
Yeah. You could just put the emojis individually and make that
They're
work.
trying to include everybody on Earth in an emoji.
Yeah.
They better have an anchor person.
Soon we're going to be scrolling for days just trying to get through all the
I
emojis
know,
to pick
yeah.
one.
I didn't realize that I didn't have a skunk available to me until this morning.
Oh,
Or a
that
sloth.
stinks.
I was looking for a sloth, like a three-toed sloth the other day, and I couldn't find it. Now
I would totally use it for you because sometimes you go a little.
I'm slow. Is that what you're saying?
That's Mike texting.
Sometimes I don't want to take the time to do this. So you're making fun of me.
Oh no, I'm just
That I-
saying. I'm
that-
just observing. I'm just observing.
I had a guy tell me the other day, why don't you use contact lenses? Because they're so easy now. They're disposable.
Yeah.
Well, one per day. So I'm going to give it a shot because I'm too afraid of the LASIK thing.
You've never worn contacts?
No, I tried to wear them when they were harder back when I was alive. And they were just, I couldn't get him onto my eyeball.
They have ones you can leave in now too.
Oh, yeah.
For a while. So
Yeah, we sleep with them.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to, though.
we'll try them out. Let's see.
And moving on to your Fox 29 Weather Authority. The Philadelphia area is slated for another cloudy and damp day this Wednesday ahead of, unfortunately, a rainy Halloween. More rain and drizzle is expected today, with temperatures topping off in the mid-60s. And thunderstorms are expected for Halloween tomorrow. The weekend, on the other hand, will see a bit of a contrast with some sunny skies and colder temperatures. Here we have a look at current temps in our area. A pretty chilly 53 degrees up in the Poconos, 55 over in Lancaster, and 60 flat here in the city of Philadelphia. Just marginally warmer down the shore, 64 degrees in Atlantic City and 62 degrees in Wildwood. Looking ahead to our 7-day forecast, again, it's going to be a cloudy, drizzly day this Wednesday, ahead of some spooky showers tomorrow for Halloween, unfortunately, for trick-or-treaters. The rain will extend a little bit into Friday with some AM rain, but will transition to PM sun ahead of a mostly sunny weekend with cooler temperatures. And don't forget to download the latest version of the Fox 29 Weather Forecast And in local news this morning, the mystery continues for one South Philadelphia family. A local man has been in a coma for 2 weeks, but no one knows quite what happened. This is what the last 18 days of life have looked like for 48-year-old Frank Tarantella. His wife, Christine, says he was assaulted on October 12th after hanging with his friends at Cookie's Tavern. He was transported to the hospital with severe head trauma, but no one will tell her what happened. Christine Lasser says the hardest part is watching their son bear so much pain. Today, he will have to celebrate his 15th birthday without his father.
He has a fracture on his skull. He also has some abrasions over here with tears in his brain. So we know for a fact that it was not just one fall, which that's what they had it written down as a fall. You don't fall and then have other tears and everything all over the brain. So we know it's not that. We know it's not that. You know, just come forward. Just come forward at this point.
Meanwhile, a daytime bartender at Cookie's Tavern told Fox 29 he doesn't know what happened to Frank and said the owner isn't interested in talking to us. His family and the Citizens Crime Commission is now offering a $10,000 reward for any information. Also in local news this morning, police say an 11-year-old girl was injured while playing with fireworks in North Philadelphia yesterday. Fox 29's Lauren Johnson has the latest.
There were screams, there were hollers, there were panics. That's when a retired nurse heard when she said she did what she would naturally do in any situation, jump in to help. And this morning, that 11-year-old girl is here at CHOP being cared for by doctors. Janice McDonald in the right place at the right time, walking home from the store when she heard the smoke alarms and the teenagers screaming almost as loud. The girls trying to tell her something exploded inside the house, blowing off an 11-year-old girl's fingers. All of this played out around 4:30 Tuesday evening in a two-story home on the 700 block of North Marvine Street. The upstairs became full of smoke.
I just wanted to do what I was able to because I'm a retired nurse. You take an oath. Don't panic. You have to help and aid and assist. I just pray that everything works out okay and that I was able to be on the scene to assist and save that child's life.
Police did confirm to us that girl was playing with fireworks inside the home when one went off. That upstairs bedroom was damaged as a result of the explosion. And just as Janice said, it was really a group effort to come to that girl's rescue. A neighbor across the street kept the girl calm. Janice stopped the bleeding, and then another neighbor rushed her off to the hospital. She was first taken to nearby Jefferson Hospital. Doctors were able to get her stable there, and they brought her here to CHOP, where we know the doctors best in the business really are trying to help salvage that young girl's hand.
Also in local news this morning, a deadly shooting in Northeast Philadelphia. It happened just after 8:30 on the 7,000th block of Algard Street. Police say a man was shot 10 times. He was rushed to the hospital, but sadly did not survive. Another man was also injured in the shooting, and he is listed in stable condition. So far, no arrests have been made. And in Camden County, prosecutors say this man tried to lure who he thought was a 14-year-old boy. Turns out that teen was an undercover special agent. Police say 41-year-old Mark Seidman thought he was chatting with the teen online. Investigators say when they agreed to meet in Pennsauken, officers were waiting for him. He now faces several charges, including luring and attempted sexual assault with a minor. Also in New Jersey, in Gloucester County, a 14-year-old student has been arrested after allegedly threatening on social media to shoot up their high school. Woodbury Heights police say the student is from Gateway Regional High School, and according to investigators, the teen wrote on Snapchat, thinking about shooting it up, TBH, which stands for to be honest. And thanks to an anonymous tip, officers arrested the 14-year-old Sunday for creating public alarm. Parents, meanwhile, tell us the situation is alarming.
To have the kids today talking like that's very scary, you know? It concerns me. You would think that they would know like how serious it is and what they're going to get, you know, from doing something like this, you know, the punishment.
Gateway High School officials now say they will review safety and security procedures to continue to be as transparent as possible. Here we have video showing the moment a plane went down before crashing into a New Jersey home yesterday. Doorbell camera video captured the plane spiraling from the sky. The FAA says the twin-engine Cessna crashed into the small Middlesex County suburb of Colonia around 11 yesterday morning, killing the pilot. No one, thankfully, was in that house, but the town's mayor says the fire soon spread to another home where a woman was able to safely evacuate.
All of a sudden I hear a boom. I was like, it's probably nothing, probably a truck being unloaded. And then my dad called me from work. He was like, did you just hear a loud boom? I was like, yeah, I did. The plane just crashed at a house not too far from here. I was like, I had to drive over and see what happened. I just can't believe what just happened.
Thankfully, no one was injured on the ground. Authorities say the flight left from Virginia and was heading to Linden Airport, just 4 miles from the crash site. And we are going to take you now over to Washington, where the House Transportation Committee is holding a hearing on the Boeing 737 MAX, examining the design, development, and marketing of the aircraft following 2 deadly accidents involving the plane. Stay with us.
And identifiable problems, and that's going to be the issue, is identifying what those problems are. But in the aftermath of these accidents, we can't address safety of the aviation system by focusing on one single factor, and there's never one single factor that contributes to an accident. I've heard safety experts refer to the Swiss cheese model of accident causation. In this model, if you use this model, you have layers. Many layers of accident protection that are visual. If you visualize them as slices of cheese with holes that represent the weaknesses, some of those weaknesses are due to conditions. Others are due to active failures. But when an accident occurs, when all of those holes and weaknesses, when they line up, that's when you have a catastrophic failure. And in the context of the 737 MAX, we have to consider all of those layers, all of them. When it comes to the protection and safety, and when we try to determine what weaknesses are out there and try to figure out what those weaknesses are. So as an investigator, the Indonesian government said about the Lion Air accident, and I quote, if one of those 9 contributing factors did not happen, the crash would not have happened. One particular layer, the design and certification of the 737 MAX, that's the focus of a number of investigations. And earlier this year, Boeing took responsibility for the MCAS design weaknesses, and they've been working on a software fix, which we're waiting to hear about that. But other weaknesses, Boeing, with the FAA's oversight, that we're going to address, they include pilot displays, operation manuals, crew training. Today, we're going to hear about the status of all of those efforts. But I want to hear about how these efforts line up with the recommendations of the Joint Authorities Technical Review, or the JTAR. The first completed review of the MAX certification by individuals with vast aviation and technical expertise is obviously due soon. But while the JTAR didn't call for an end to the FAA's delegation programs, it did highlight some bureaucratic efficiencies in the relationship between Boeing and the FAA, and we have to address those, and I know we will. The FAA, their concern, or the FAA concurred with the JTAR's report and is committed to working on these recommendations, which is good. We obviously have to have oversight to make sure that happens. But lastly, Mr. Muhlenberg, I want to hear about recently shared documents relating to Boeing's former chief technical pilot for the 737, and I'm sure you're going to do that. But other investigations are moving forward as well. And last month, the National Transportation Safety Board, they issued a recommendation report which largely focused on the assumptions that were made during the design and certification process related to human factors. Design and certification cannot be the sole focus of our efforts. And I've said this before, that's only one layer of that cheese model that I talked about. In the last few months, other weaknesses that appear to have played a role in these accidents have surfaced. Reports earlier this month called into question evidence submitted to the Lion Air investigation, which related to the installation, calibration, and testing of the faulty angle of attack sensor. There's also been whistleblower statements and other reports raising significant concerns with Lion Air and Ethiopian Airlines operation and maintenance programs. The former chief engineer for Ethiopian Airlines filed a whistleblower complaint alleging significant problems with that airline's maintenance, training, and record keeping. He also alleges that the air carrier went into the maintenance records of the 737 MAX. He alleged went into the maintenance records of the 737 MAX a day after the accident. And unfortunately, operational pressures and lack of robust safety culture can negatively impact aviation safety. That's another layer of that model that I talked about. The NTSB has confirmed that along with certification, operational factors are going to be the focus of its accident investigations. And in addition, along with its own MAX certification review, the Department of Transportation, their IG, their Inspector General, at the request of the committee's leadership, is soon going to begin a review of the international training standards and the impact of automation, which is another thing that I've talked about as a potential problem. But I want to be crystal clear in reviewing these areas that this is not an effort to blame the pilots. And I don't blame the pilots, and I don't absolve Boeing of its responsibility. But a September New York Times Magazine article, it described the changing nature of the airline industry and the impact it's having on airmanship. The article refers to a decade-long transformation of the entire business of flying, in which airplanes became so automated and accidents so rare that a cheap air travel boom was able to take root around the world. And this boom in air travel resulted in the need for more and more pilots, but the pool of experienced pilots couldn't keep up. I remember getting letters from airlines all over the world just simply because I had ATP on my license, getting letters offering me jobs to quit what I was doing and come fly for them. But I'll continue to repeat this. Pilots can master cockpit technology, but when the technology fails, they have to be able to fly the plane, not just fly the computer. And to be clear, none of this is reflection on Lion Air or Ethiopia's pilots' professionalism or character. They were fighting for their lives. That's the bottom line. But instead, it's a reflection on the broader pressures that's present today in the global aviation economy. And it's incumbent on the airline whose name is on the side of that airplane to ensure that their pilots are properly trained to the level that they need to be and not rushed into the cockpits to meet those demands. That's where some of this blame lies. In Ethiopia in particular, the government owns the airline, and they put pilots in there that something above their head. It's not the pilot's fault. You have to look at who put them in that position to be responsible for hundreds of lives. So in line with that Swiss cheese model and other layers of protection, such as pilot actions, airline operations, maintenance, training programs, they must also be explored, and all of those weaknesses have to be addressed. And I still believe that the FAA remains the gold standard in aviation safety. And once the agency certifies the fixes to the MAX, I will gladly volunteer to be the very first person right alongside Administrator Dixon in the very first flight of the MAX 8. In regard to the two 737 MAX accidents, I think all of those issues need to be addressed, but only after we've had the benefit of various investigative works that have yet to be completed. Jumping to conclusions before that work is done only risks more harm than good. The bottom line is the U.S. safety record speaks for itself, and I'll stand up to anybody that tries to question that. The FAA's proven system has made air travel the safest mode of transportation in history. And with that, I appreciate the opportunity and the deference, Mr. Chairman, and I look forward to today's hearing and yield back anything I have left.
I thank the gentleman. I would now turn to the chairman of the subcommittee, Mr. Larson.
Thank you, Chair DeFazio. I'll be brief because I want to get to the reason why we're here today. That's for questions 2 and clear and direct answers from Boeing. But yesterday I did release a video opening statement, and you can find my full comments there. But in summary, I want to say this, that the 346 lives lost in Lion Air 610 and Ethiopian Airlines 302 crashes, those are constant reminders of the importance of this committee's work and what is at stake if we do not address systemic safety issues in U.S. aviation today. Some of the victims' family members are here with us today. Others are watching on a live stream, and your presence and tireless advocacy are critical to what we are doing today. I want to thank you for that. You deserve answers, and you rightfully expect Congress to act. Following the recent release of recommendations from the JATR, the NTSB, the Indonesian authorities, and Boeing itself, though, I do want to say I see one undeniable conclusion. The process by which the Federal Aviation Administration evaluates and certifies aircraft is itself in need of repair. It is no accident that there are few airplane accidents. It makes it all the more tragic when there is one. It makes it even worse when there are two. So as the committee's investigation continues, we should maintain safety as our guiding principle and use all the tools at our disposal to ensure the safety of the traveling public. With that, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. I now turn to the ranking member on the subcommittee on aviation, Mr. Graves from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this hearing today. Yesterday was 1 year since the Lion Air tragedy, and I too want to join, I think, everyone sitting up here in offering our condolences to all of the Ethiopian family victims, the Indonesian family victims. Here we are in Washington, and everybody in this town, nearly in this town, you sit up here and you're dealing with billions and trillions of dollars and all these crazy acronyms and processes, and none of it often makes sense or fits the common sense test. And oftentimes you see people that just forget about objectives. Why are we actually doing this? What is the purpose of this whole process that we go through, the regulations, the procedures? Why? And at the end, it's always about people. That's what we're here for. We're here for people, for fellow Americans, fellow citizens. And it is amazing to me, just being here, how often that is forgotten. I'm sorry to every one of you, and your pictures are incredibly powerful. You know, I used to be a rock climbing instructor, and when we would go out there, we would have somebody's son or daughter, somebody's brother or sister. And when you're out there rock climbing, look, there's no room for error, none. You lose somebody on a rock, there's no room for error. Air travel is the same thing. There's no room for, you can't, we're going to pull over to the side of the road and see what's going on. I hear a noise coming out of the engine. That's not an option. This process has got to stay focused on the risk that air travel poses. The fact that you can't pull over to the side of the road, that you've got to have redundancies. And look, there's an awful lot going on right now with all of the different reports, investigations that are going on, and I'm going to run through those in a minute. But there's an awful lot going on. But for example, if there truly was one AOA sensor that could potentially engage MCAS, that's not the proper redundancies. And when you're looking at the safety that's posed, the risk that's posed in this case, it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. A while back, I had the chance to represent the state of Louisiana in the Deepwater Horizon disaster, and spent a lot of time with the families there, and spent many days in the court listening to testimony. And I do believe, and I think that the judge found that there was an inappropriate culture of focusing on the wrong objectives. And oftentimes people can be looking at stock prices or economics or how many people can we fit in here, or how fast can this jet travel, or what have you. I'm going to say it again. This is 100% about people. And I've heard people talk about this whole process and say that, well, this process was short-circuited. Well, you know, you can look back and you can look at the 737-6, 7, 8, 9. You can look at the A319, A320, 321, the E190, E195, the C919, and many versions of those aircraft. And you know what? Every single one of those actually was certified or approved in a shorter period of time than the MAX. So it's not just about how long, it's what we actually do during that process. What are we doing during the process to make sure that that this is a safe aircraft, to make sure that we're not putting folks at undue risk? Now, I've heard a lot of people talk about a lot of different ideas and solutions and things that they want to do, and as we move forward, and people posing solutions right now, and certainly we need to extract every single lesson learned that we can. But right now, and I somehow ditched my list. Right now we have investigations the Indonesian authorities, the Ethiopian authorities, the NTSB, we have the JATR, we have the Technical Advisory Board, the TAB, we have the Office of Special Counsel that is working with the whistleblower complaint. We have the Secretary of Transportation that set up a special committee. Boeing is doing an internal investigation. We have so many different investigations that are going on. One thing that we've got to make sure that we do is focus on facts. One thing that I've seen in this body in the 4.5 years that I've been here is us responding emotionally to things and not responding to facts. And we'll go and do something that may make us feel good, but does not actually respond to the facts. And so as we move forward, and I'm sure I left out some of the investigations that are ongoing, but as we move forward, we have got to make sure that we are acting on the facts, and every single outcome, every single problem that we have identified, we've got to make sure that we truly base our solutions on those facts to where this doesn't happen again. Lastly, Mr. Chairman, the families shared a number of concerns that I think are right on, and I do want to ask that Boeing get back to us on these. And it was things like fully disclosing the MCAS fix before the plane is allowed to fly, if it's allowed to fly again. Fully defining the role of the MCAS system. All right, I'll submit.
I would suggest you could submit those for the record, or you could ask during the question period. So that would be. I thank gentlemen. With that, we'll turn to the witness, which for an opening statement.
Chairman DeFazio, Ranking Member Graves, Congressman Larson, Congressman Graves, thank you, and to the whole committee. We appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and we're going to do our best to answer all of your questions. Before we get started, I too would like to acknowledge the families that are here with us today, and again wanted to tell you I'm sorry, and I've had the opportunity to talk with some of you and hear your stories, and we are deeply, deeply sorry, and we'll never forget. And I want you to know that, and we're committed to making the improvements that we need to make. We're committed. And I had the chance to hear some of those stories and see the photos and listen to personal stories, and it does get to a business that's about people. And I think Congressman Graves said it well. That's where our hearts will always be. And I know all of Boeing, our 150,000 people, feel the same way, and they think about this every day. We will carry the memories.
You're not loud enough?
Can you speak a little closer into your microphone, just so a little more audible? Thank you.
You can just pull it toward you, Mr. Mueller.
Is that better? Yeah. Thank you. Sorry. Please know that we carry the memories of these accidents with us, and the loved ones, the memories of them, they will never be forgotten. And their memories will drive us every day to make our airplanes safer and to make this industry safer. And we are committed to doing that. I am grateful to have the opportunity to be here today to say this to the families personally. And I want to let you all know that we are dedicated to learning. We are learning. We still have more to learn. We have work to do to restore the public's trust. And we will do everything possible to prevent accidents like this from ever happening again. Mr. Chairman, I know this committee has many questions about the MAX, and we'll do our best to answer those today. And while investigations are still underway, we know both accidents involved the repeated activation of a flight control software system called MCAS, which we've already talked about. That system responded to erroneous signals from angle of attack sensor. Based on that, we've enhanced MCAS in 3 ways. First, it will now compare information from both sensors instead of one before activating. Second, MCAS will only activate a single time. And third, MCAS will never provide more input than the pilot can counteract using the control column alone. Pilots will also continue to have the ability to override MCAS at any time. We've brought the best of Boeing to this effort. We've spent over 100,000 engineering and test hours. We've flown more than 800 test flights. We've conducted simulator sessions with 545 participants from 99 customers and 41 global regulators. I've flown on a couple of flights myself. This has taken longer than expected, but we are committed to getting it right. During this process, we've worked closely with the FAA and other regulators. We provided them with documentation, had them fly the simulators, answered their questions. And regulators around the world should rigorously scrutinize the MAX and only approve its return when they are completely satisfied with its safety. The public deserves nothing less. Mr. Chairman, today and every day, over 5 million people will board a Boeing airplane and fly safely to their destination. Decades of cooperation and innovation by industry and regulators and the rigorous oversight of this committee have reduced accidents by more than 95% over the last 20 years. But no number other than 0 accidents is ever acceptable. We can and must do better. We've been challenged and changed by these accidents. We've made mistakes, and we've learned, and we are still learning, and we're improving. We established a permanent aerospace safety committee for our board. We've stood up a new safety organization, and we've strengthened our engineering organization so that all 50,000 engineers now report up through Boeing's chief engineer. We're also helping to rebuild the communities and the families impacted by these accidents. We've pledged $100 million to this effort. We've hired renowned experts in this area to ensure families can access these funds as quickly as possible. No amount of money can bring back what was lost, but we can at least help the families meet their financial needs. Mr. Chairman, I started at Boeing more than 30 years ago as a summer intern in Seattle. I was a junior at Iowa State University studying engineering, and I'd grown up on a farm in Iowa. My parents taught me the value of hard work and integrity. I was awestruck to work at the company that brought the jet age to the world and helped land a person on the moon. Today, I'm still inspired by what Boeing does and by the remarkable men and women who are committed to continuing its legacy. But these heartbreaking accidents and the memories of the 346 lives lost are now part of that legacy. It's our solemn duty to learn from them, and we will. Recently, there's been much criticism of Boeing and our culture. We understand and deserve this scrutiny. But I know the people of Boeing. They are more than 150,000 of the hardest working, most dedicated, honest people you will ever meet. And their commitment to safety, quality, and integrity is unparalleled, and it is resolute. We will stay true to those values because we know our work demands it. It demands the utmost excellence. So thank you for this opportunity to convey to the world that we're committed to changing and to making sure that accidents like these never happen again. Mr. Chairman, thank you for listening, and I look forward to your questions.
I thank the gentleman. As I stated at the outset, with consultation with the minority, both myself and Mr. Graves will open with 10 minutes, and then we'll move to other members for 5 minutes in the usual order. Mr. Muhlenberg, it's clear, obviously, from everything we know and the Lion Air report now that MCAS was a major factor that contributed. But, Boeing's position, at least prior to these crashes, was it was an autonomous system and it operated in the background. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that was the design approach, yes.
Yes. But the question is, how do we get to that? And we have a slide. You'll be able to see it right in front of you. Staff? Yes. This was a concept design for the flight deck in 2012. And as you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, there was an MCAS alert indicator. So at least at some point, some on the engineering and design staff felt it would be important to make the pilots aware of the system and to have an indicator light. Do you agree that that was originally proposed?
Congressman, understand that was part of an early trade study at that point, and very common that early in the design stage we'd evaluate different flight deck alert systems.
Thank you. So, but obviously the final version did not have that. That light was, there was no indication either in the manual or on the flight deck of the presence of MCAS.
Congressman, I think John can answer that question.
Yes, Chairman, the MCAS light, as you pointed out, the intent of it was to signal an MCAS failure. It's important to note that in these accidents, the MCAS system did not fail.
Right, it triggered.
And it would not have lit up.
But
the
it was
functionality of the MCAS light was actually, the reason it was deleted was because the functionality was incorporated into the speed trim fail light, which you can see just adjacent to that. The MCAS is an extension of the speed trim system.
Thank you for that. But when it was a relatively benign system, 0.6 degrees, it was in the manual, and then when it went to repeated 2.5 degrees, it came out of the manual. Is that correct? I have seen very early versions of the manual that indicate that you had MCAS in the manual, your test pilot asked FAA to take it out, and it came out.
Congressman, if I could try to clarify, because you're asking questions that span into a couple of areas, just if I could clarify.
Well,
so there was the intent, the MCAS inclusion in the training manual, that was an iterative process that was occurring in parallel to the extension of MCAS to low-speed operation, which I believe is what you're referring to. So the extension of MCAS to low-speed operation, that was done and flight tested from a period of around middle of 2016.
Yeah, we understand that, and we understand some of the problems in the way it was tested and it wasn't tested with the AOA failure, but that's good for now. A key assumption was reaction time. And, with the AOA failure, the MCAS activates, and it's 2.5 degrees every 10 seconds, pretty radical. And Boeing assumed it would take pilots 4 seconds to recognize and react to runaway stabilizer. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, again, as we do what we call hazard analysis for the airplane design.
4 seconds was the
in this particular
assumption.
case, that was the assumption. That's a long-standing industry assumption for systems like this.
Lion Air report says it took pilots 8 seconds to react. And then we have information provided to the committee by Boeing, which will now be the second slide. And it says there, a slow reaction time scenario, 10 seconds, found the failure to be catastrophic. Do you think that was clearly, was this document ever clearly communicated to the regulators? That a 10-second delay, which doesn't seem like a lot of time to me, particularly when you look at the NTSB report and the cacophony going on the flight deck, and particularly in the case of Lion Air when they didn't even know the system existed. Was the FAA aware of this document?
Chairman, I can't speak to this specific document. John may be able to, but I do think it's important to note that as part of the design process, we use a set of industry standard practices on these timelines. This is a common part of our hazard analysis.
But
that was shared
right.
with the
I understand, and I understand what the industry standard was, but I mean, it does cause a little concern. 10 seconds, I mean, you can say, gee, really good pilots can do it in less than 10 seconds. Pilots aren't, at the top of their game every day, and particularly in the first iteration, at least, when they weren't even aware of the system. I think that assumption should have rung some alarm bells. So, I mean, do you think, in retrospect, it was a mistake to not inform pilots of the existence of the MCAS system?
Congressman, a few things on that, and agree. We made some mistakes on MCAS. And as we've gone back and taken a look at this, moving from a single sensor to a dual sensor feed is an important part of that. Providing additional training information, which the feedback we've gotten from the pilots, as you noted, is part of that. And then revisiting these decades-long industry standards. I think you see a similar recommendation out of the JADER report.
Of course, the question would be, why was it just originally wired to one sensor, which again, single point of failure, as then acting administrator Elwell said in May, a safety critical system. That's just not done. And you know, as the NTSB said, multiple alerts and indication can increase pilots' workload. The combination of the alerts and indications did not trigger the accident pilots to immediately perform the runaway stabilizer, functions. Okay, again, let's just, Mr. Hamilton, are you aware of any other aircraft out there that has a safety critical system that is dependent upon a single point of failure?
Chairman, single point of failures are allowed in airplane design. Regulation 25.1309 actually discusses that and talks about different hazard categories.
And this one was deemed to be catastrophic. I know there's 3 categories. You didn't deem it to be catastrophic, although in looking at the 10-second, you said it was catastrophic. It was classified as major, as I recall.
Yeah, catastrophic is one category. And so when we test out systems, we do look at their impact on the airplane when there's failures. And we did look at 10 seconds, but we also then took it into the simulator with pilots, and the typical reaction time was 4 seconds.
I put up another document. It's right in front of you there. 12/17/2015. I don't know if you're aware of this, but this was raised by one of your engineers. Are we vulnerable to a single AOA sensor failure with the MCAS implementation, or is there some checking that occurs? Did you ever receive this communication, and did you respond to that, engineer?
Chairman, I did not actually receive this communication, but I am aware of the communication recently as it surfaced. In talking with the engineer, I think it highlights that our engineers do raise questions in an open culture. They question things, but it also followed our thorough process and was determined that the single sensor, from a reliability and availability standpoint, met the hazard category and the safety.
Well, of course, we don't know what happened in Ethiopia, but there's some speculation a bird sheared it off. They're pretty delicate little things out there, actually. I've seen them. And now, of course, the final slide here is now, as you emphasize, flight control will now compare inputs from both AOA sensors. And I guess the question is, why wasn't it that way from day one? Why wasn't it that way from day one? If you can do it now with an extra wire or a software fix or whatever, why didn't you do it from day one? Why not have that redundancy?
Mr. Chairman, we've asked ourselves that same question over and over. And if back then we knew everything that we know now, we would have made a different decision. The original concept from a safety standpoint was to build the MCAS, extend the current speed trim system on the previous generation, the 737. That's a system that had about 200 million safe flight hours on it. Mm-hmm. So one of our safety principles is to take safe systems and then incrementally extend them. That was the safety concept behind the original decision.
All right. Well, thank you.
We've learned since then.
Right.
And that's why we've moved to this new design.
Sure. My time has expired, and I want to turn to the ranking member. Ranking member, Mr. Graves is recognized.
Hard to know where to start. And I want to go back to just kind of for clarification to that first slide with the MCAS. If we can bring that, can we bring that up?
First slide, back up, please, for Sam. The one that shows the flight deck with the MCAS.
The MCAS warning, like to me, would be. This is, I guess, more of an editorial comment. You ever been in your car and the check engine light comes on? Yep. And we're, what the heck? Okay, so what is it? Is it the oil pressure? Is it the oil temperature? Is it the vacuum? I don't know what it is. It's just a general check engine, and the stuff that's more important to me, is the stuff that's on the left, because MCAS manifests itself as a trim issue. It's a runaway trim issue, which again I go back to training, and you have memory items. Every pilot is, I shouldn't say that. In the United States, pilots are taught to have memory items. You instantly go through those when you have a failure. You start through that checklist in your mind, and we have some of them are even goofy little rhymes or whatever that to help you remember, and you go through each one of these processes. And in the case of Ethiopian Air, they never did retard. I still come back to this too. They never retarded the throttles. They set the throttles for takeoff, and they never pulled them back. They went right through the maximum certified speed of the 736 or 737 MAX 8, right on through, right up to 500 miles per hour, way beyond the maximum certified speed. That's the reason they can't manually trim the airplane, is because it's going so fast. And I've used that analogy too. Try go down the road at 70 miles an hour. Try opening the door. See if you can open the door and see what the pressures are against the door of your car. The more pressure there is, the faster you're going, the more pressure there is, and the more that the harder it is to try to reverse those pressures. But you go through those memory items, and you immediately start ticking down. And the chairman's right in terms of what's the average? Is it 4 seconds to react, 10 seconds to react? And I guess that's one of the flaws that we need to be thinking about. Is, I guess we're going to have to start building airplanes to the least common denominator in terms of, and that's a poor choice of words, I guess you might say, but the least common denominator in terms of international, we got to start thinking about, if we're going to export, we're going to have to start thinking about international, training standards. And I know that's one of the things that's being looked at and how they train. Did they have those memory items? Could they tick them off? Most pilots will sit there and they'll do it in the shower. You go through your memory items. I do it all the time in the shower. Just sit there and tick through my memory items on, engine failure, trim failure, whatever those might be. But I guess we're making assumptions, and the FAA is making assumptions. Manufacturers are making assumptions about pilot training experience, and in the aftermath of these two accidents, and this question is for Mr. Muhlenberg. Do you believe that these assumptions, particularly for aircraft that are going to be operated outside of the United States, do we need to revisit those assumptions?
Congressman.
And that is going to do it for us today at Fox 29's News Now. Be sure to catch us again tomorrow at 10 a.m. and follow us at fox29.com as well as our mobile app and across social media. And thank you for joining us this morning.